Welcome to Positive Connections Radio. This is Mike Koch. This podcast is directed towards first responders and others who may be suffering in silence and are fearful to ask for help. You're not alone. You don't have to lose it all in order to get help. Trust yourself, stand up, and break the stigma. Welcome back to Positive Connections. This is Mike Koch. It's Coast to Coast Call for Backup series. And Jim, welcome.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Jim McLintock. It's awesome to be here. And if we can help just one person out there in the listening audience, I would be very, very thrilled to be able to do that. I'm a clinical psychology, licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And I work throughout California and also in the United States as a coach, specializing in police, fire, military, everybody who's in the dispatchers, everybody who's in the EMS profession.
And the goal of this is to get it out into training, whether you're first responder related or not. But if we can bring up topics during this, we'd really appreciate it. If you get back to us, you can email me at positiveconnectionsradio.com, or you can even contact Jim, and I'll put that all in the show notes. And so down the road, they won't be really long podcasts, but something that we can dive into some topics, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and maybe get some responses back and maybe help some people understand things a little bit better, that you're not alone and there's help available.
That'd be awesome. My confidential cell phone number is area code 760-212-0444. Again, 760-212-0444. You're all welcome to call or send me a text message. My email, 911therapy@gmail.com. The number is 911, the word therapy, @gmail.com.
Right on, Jim. So do you want to get right into Arrested Development?
Let's go for it. Yeah. When we talk about folks who are struggling in life, particularly with addictions and recovery, we take a hard look at chronological age, the age of the person, versus where they might be emotionally. We have seen a common thread with people, can be in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, who are chronologically 40, 56 years old, but their age of their addiction started 10, 11, 12, and even sometimes with trauma going much further back than that. And that's where their development, their emotional development has arrested itself at. So, for example, the listening audience, do you have self-awareness about yourself? Like when you're sitting in a briefing room, going through training, responding to a call for service. There you are, responsible for your black and white or your green and white or the red vehicle you're in or whatever. And you pull up and you step out of the car with your uniform and the public trust, or you're responding as a paramedic, or you're answering 911 calls as a dispatcher. And for a moment in time, you're processing chronologically as a mature adult. But then suddenly your buttons are getting pressed, what we call contempt of cop, or a person is yelling at you on the phone, or you're going through a hard rescue, the patient's not complying or whatever's going on, and all of a sudden, or your sergeant's pissing you off, somebody within your division is angering you, and you find yourself losing patience, wanting to curse at them. In that moment in time, you have gone from a 30, 40, 50-year-old man, woman, and now you're responding with arrested development, your emotional age. You're coming across as a entitled, selfish, rude 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old. You all know what I'm talking about. And that's what one of the topics about today is, arrested development and how it could be affecting your career, your profession, and your life.
A lot of it comes from trauma-related regression. So it could come from abuse, neglect, accidents, bullying, as a child, and it manifests when you get older.
Absolutely.
I have a good article I read. It's from Kindness, Compassion, and Coaching, September 10th, 2022. And it said signs of arrested development. When adults tend to act like children, it could be a strong clue that they suffer from arrested development. Some examples of specific behaviors to look out for include the following 7 things: tantrums, being unable to manage anger and other emotions, telling lies, name calling and bullying, poor impulse control, blame shifting, seeking the spotlight, or self-centeredness. And a lot of times we end up getting into fields that put us in more control. So we don't really have to face those things, and we don't really realize where they come from.
Absolutely. And you know what else? It tends to solidify within us, you know, the my way or the highway kind of thinking. You know, in these professions, in law enforcement, in a fire service, paramedic, in dispatchers, you know, you show up on a call for service, you're being dispatched out there, and you're the street professional for that moment in time. And in your mind, you're well trained. You have amazing street observations going on. You've got this really wonderful combination of book smart, street smart, people smart, life smart. And then if somebody isn't listening to you, or if all of a sudden your commander walks up and starts, you know, saying mean things to you or ordering you around, and they haven't taken the time to inquire what your thought process is, or just people are just, you know, being mean to you on the street. If we're not careful, our arrested development can really jump in and take over for us. It's kind of a perfect storm setup. I'm in this position of power. I have a badge, a gun sometimes, patches, a vehicle. I'm showing up as the street authority on something. And if people don't listen to me, or if I am suddenly, and it goes back to the halt and call for backup concept, Mike, if I'm suddenly, am I low blood sugar? Am I hungry? Have I gone to this call? Am I getting angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Am I sick? Am I frustrated? Am I feeling disrespected? Am I not being listened to? Am I in pain? Do I got financial things going on? Do I have relational things going on? Suddenly, all of that can come into focus and affect our decision making, affect how we're communicating to people, and it can really set us up in a bad place.
I definitely agree with that too. So what do we do about it?
Well, I think always self-awareness is the first place to go. You know, the folks that are listening out there, what are you aware of with yourself right now? When you are doing life, when you go to work, are you having a good time at work? Are you going there? Are you holding your head up high and enjoying your job? Not looking forward to what the commander has to say during briefing? Do you sit back and start judging people? Do you get wounded very easily? You know, Mike, if you went back over that bullet point list that you have, are you feeling any of these things as a grown adult while you're at work? Hit that list again, Mike. What are
so
those?
Tantrums, being unable to manage anger, other emotions, start telling lies, name calling, poor impulse control, interrupting other people as they speak. And you know what? It also can cause confusion, resentment, and it definitely can lead into other things like addictions.
Absolutely. You know, how do we learn to tamp down our emotions in this point in time? Alcohol, spending sprees, gambling, pornography, you know, you name it, can start taking the place of our coping skills, our ability to regulate our emotions in a healthy manner. And just like the arrested development pieces, these can be our go-to default positions for a lot of good reasons, like we were talking about. It could be early trauma. It could be just life and what you've endured through it. But self-awareness, being aware of how you're thinking, what you're thinking, how you're presenting yourself is the first place to go. Some people know exactly what we're talking about, Mike. They're sitting back and listening to us right now and saying, yeah, that's me.
Are they willing to say something about it? Because I hear all this stuff, and all I hear in my negative part of my brain is negative, negative, negative. You know, you can't do this. You're a liar. You throw fits. You're a little kid. You're self-centered. You have narcissistic tendencies. A lot of us first responder realms, yes, we do. Could that be a good thing? Yeah, it can be a good thing if we take a look at ourselves. This draws you, and that, just like what we're talking about, and people listening to it also, it draws up that dialogue. We can have a sense of confidentiality when we're talking about these things and bringing up these kind of topics. We could sit around and discuss, what does this mean to me? Once you start hearing someone else talk about their issues and being vulnerable and being vulnerable is a very strong word, and it's a practice to do when you're willing to and you have the right venue to do so.
Absolutely. That piece about feeling safe. Do you have a safe spot with which you can communicate your deepest feelings to somebody. It's hard to find. It's hard to find in friends. It's hard to find in our families, and it's hard to find in our relationships. There are, you think I'd have it all figured out, doing what I do for a career and where I've been in life as a career. There are some family members, there are some friends that I can talk to. Mike, you're one of them. I can tell Mike anything. And I will never feel judged. I will never feel abandoned. Mike will listen to me until the cows come home. And then Mike's really good about, hey, Jim, what do you need, man? Do you just need to listen? Do you need me to listen, or do you need some advice here? And I'll tell him what I need at that moment in time. It's hard to find that in our families and our friends and our professions. More often than not, we don't want to open up because we feel judged. There's no mercy. There's not a sense of being heard. It's a very dangerous situation. And that's, not even talking about how most of the folks that are in these professions are afraid of losing their careers or suddenly stopping their upward rise through the ranks, always wanting to look perfect. And I just think it's a fool's game. And I think the stats and the research shows it out. We talk about working with the folks in the military and PTSD and everything, and it always comes back down to the same thing over and over again. Are you talking about what's going on? Do you have a trusted group of people, a doctor, a counselor that you can talk to? And do you have that in your home life? How many times, Mike, you were talking earlier today about, you facilitate these really amazing groups and how sometimes the groups just open up. And it's like magic watching it happen.
Well, you know what? It is a ripple effect. So it's ripple effect in vulnerability. Now, when I say being vulnerable and I say opening up, and I say being confidential and you can trust me, it's a sign of weakness for a lot of us to open up about our fears, our worries. We want to be the strong ones. I want to be able to take care of any situation and not have anybody help me because I'm the helper. I should be able to help myself. Being vulnerable and having a group setting where you can actually talk to other peers that understand where you're coming from. And once I am able to cross that line of fear, when I'm able to challenge my fears and grow, I have a personal growth because of that, because I'm actually saying things that I normally wouldn't say because I'm afraid that you're going to judge me. I need to get this out for me. I'm not doing it for anybody else but me. And once it's out, I don't care who you tell, really. I really don't. I mean, and that's just, I'm speaking of myself. And sometimes it takes a long time to get to that point.
When it's funny about when we do these groups, when we facilitate groups, and sometimes the clients are eager to attend, sometimes they're not, and sometimes they're in the middle someplace. And just like what you said a second ago, I always encourage, it's kind of a two-prong effect. You can go to a group, you can learn to be vulnerable, you can start opening up and just trying and seeing where it lands. And sometimes we go to groups, sometimes we go and talk to people, and it's to help us out. Sometimes our mere presence at these groups is actually helping somebody else out. I guarantee you there's somebody in that group that's just staring there that said, I didn't really come here to say a thing.
So, and there's a trust thing for sure. How do we duplicate that all over around the country in other departments, other settings, peer support groups? Number one is this. You have to have a confidential, welcoming location that's secure and safe. It's acceptable to talk about issues and they don't leave those walls. If anybody wants a format for that of a meeting, a general fellowship meeting, email me, call me, and I'll give you that information. Wonderful. And to have a meeting like that, it's so important, even if it's just once a week. Someone can go for an hour and know when I get to that meeting, it's going to be safe and secure. And it might take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times going before you feel safe enough. Even if you're with a bunch of other first responders, cops and firefighters in this room, it might take a little while for you to actually gain that trust. But once you do, the healing begins. It really does.
Back in the 1990s, there was this a TV show called The West Wing. And there was one particular episode that just caught my attention, and just I was riveted to the television set watching it. And real quickly, it's the story of one of the presidential main people who was struggling with alcoholism. And, he didn't have a place to go, didn't have a support, was scared to say anything. And then another person recognized what was happening with this person and said, on Wednesday night in the basement, room number, A33, knock on the door 3 times, and so when Wednesday night came along, it shows this character going down to the basement of the West Wing to that specific room number, and he knocks on the door 3 times. And wouldn't you know it, one of the commanders in plain clothes from the Pentagon opens the door for him and says, "Welcome, Jim, come on inside." And as the door opens, you see all of these high-powered senators, congressmen and women, folks from the Pentagon, all walks of life at the White House and the West Wing are all in this private, safe, confidential meeting where there's no ranks. The uniforms and the bars are left at the door, and they're all just there helping each other out through their alcoholism and their recovery. And since that time, I have known in so many different places how a police officer starts up a group. There's nobody to talk to. I'm going to start this group. I'm going to start putting the word out there. There's a confidential room. It's not for public broadcast. You just put it out there, one person at a time. And in different places, how women will put it out one word at a time to somebody, and they build a group. So Mike Koch has some phenomenal resources for you all. And if there's people out there that want to start a group, contact Mike.
And I would recommend to work on yourself. If you're going to groups right now, continue doing so. If you're seeing counseling and if being a therapist like Jim, continue doing that. But when you feel that you're able to do that, organize something, the one thing you have to do is make sure that you're punctual and that you have those meetings every week. Once you start a meeting, don't stop it. Make sure that meeting goes every week at that time. Everybody knows it. Sometimes it takes several months. When I started my first AA group just for first responders back in 2017, the end of it took about 6 months. I had me and another guy that were there every Sunday night, and now it's via Zoom since COVID, and have anywhere from 20 to 30 people on there every week. There's a lot of regulars that come on there too, but it's just first responders. We all get it. And we can open up about our issues. And there's other meetings you can go to, not necessarily Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, but fellowship groups just for first responders. We get each other, just like any other field. If it was a doctors or if it were lawyers or judges, they have the similar groups like that also, where they're confident that they go in there. It's a safe, secure place. They trust everybody, and they could talk about the issues that have been really bothering them and how to get through them, working a solid program of recovery. And it does take a lot of dedication, but you have to make sure that you're okay first. I've seen a lot of people go into recovery and they're sober for a month and a half and they're ready to save the world. They're ready to teach classes. They're ready to go out and talk about, what survival is and PTS and all that stuff. And they might not be ready.
Right. It gets down to that wisdom and that self-awareness. And what you're talking about, Mike, taps into just the wonderful nature of these folks in the first responder profession. They are the ones going into the situations or answering the 911 calls in the situations when no one else wants to hear that and everybody else is running in the opposite direction. And there's such empathy. There is such hearts. Like you and I can both relate to the fact that many times in our careers, we have gone screaming through the night, with our foot on the floor, red lights flashing and the sirens screaming, after complete strangers. We don't know who's calling. All we know is they're calling, and we're going to get there. So we automatically have these great hearts to help other people. And as Mike is saying, that's beautiful. It can also get in the way of our own individual work and our own individual recovery. And I'd like to talk about, being intelligently selfish. There's a difference between being selfish. It's all about me. nobody else, and intelligently selfish. You know what? I'm going to go to this meeting. I want to learn. I want to grow. If there's someone there struggling, I can talk to them or I can point them in the right direction, but I want to manage myself. Am I in a place where I can, if I offer wisdom, will that surge of empathy overwhelm me and take over where I'm doing all the talking suddenly? And I'm not really connecting with the work that I need to do with myself.
Exactly. And take that chance. Go to those meetings. If you're invited, if you hear something's pinned up on your wall at the station, hey, there's a meeting going on. A lot of us see it, but we don't want to do it. I would challenge you to embrace change, embrace fear as an opportunity for growth. When you end up going to those meetings and doing those things and talking about it in front of other people, it's such a freedom. It really is. But you'll never know if you don't try it.
We can get to this point from the trauma we've experienced where we allow the traumatic experience or our life experience to over accommodate, where we, once upon a time, we would reach out and we would trust people, places, and things until those things prove themselves untrustworthy. Then all of a sudden our hypervigilance kicks in, get a little bit of paranoia going in, self-survival's kicking in. We're looking for all the different escape avenues. We're walking into the mall to shop for Christmas, and all we can do is think about, how am I going to get out of here if a bomb explodes? And I get it. But what happens in that moment in time is we start over accommodating the trauma in our life. And I know it's easy for me to say on this side of the microphone, but it's where the work should be done at is, okay, wait a second. As Mike was talking about, there's a meeting going on. I'm nervous about attending this thing. I don't know who's going to be there. I don't know what they're going to think. I don't know what they might say to me, but I want to make a choice in life to start trusting again until other people, other things, other places prove themselves untrustworthy. Does that make sense?
Exactly. You might hear something like this and see if you can relate. You're at a call and it's a horrible call. It's shocking. It's devastating. There's everything you can imagine has gone wrong in this situation. It's traumatic, and you have to keep that game face on. You have to have that command presence to deal with the victims, to deal with the suspects, to deal with all that goes with it. The most horrible of horrible situations. And that might just be one of 1,000 that you've gone to. And after the scene, you're driving back to your beat in your patrol car, and you pull over into a dark area, probably a parking lot of a church, back into a spot, make sure no one else is around, and start weeping. And all the emotions come out because finally you're able to release it. And you're fearful of your partner pulling up next to you for an 87 because he's going to see that your eyes are all red and bloodshot because you've been crying. If you can relate to that, you're not alone. That was my story. And you'll hear stories like that. And when I started hearing stories like that, I thought I was the only one in the whole world ever experienced it. But when other people in active recovery start talking about the experiences they've had, I can relate. I can trust you because you've lived my life. I have lived your life. And let's share this moment together. It's healing. It definitely is healing.
Mike, I'd had the same stories happen to me, whether I was a beach lifeguard, seeing things at the beach that normally, it's a great day at the beach and they're surfing or playing in volleyball or hanging out with friends or whatever. And all of a sudden I'm in a situation and I'm seeing wounds and things that I never imagined I would see. Or as a police officer, I can't tell you, I don't have to get into all the different calls, but how many times all of us have experienced something that we should never have experienced, but nor should those victims have experienced either. While I love the first paragraph from the law enforcement, code of ethics, courageous calm in the face of danger, scorn, and ridicule. But then what? But then what? When you drive away, man, there were times I was weeping and I was afraid for people to walk up. And thank God I was working nights. I could hide in the shadows someplace and just let it rip, and then clean my face up and kind of go on. But it was interesting too, Mike, as you're talking about, I had that kind of combination thing happening. I'm scared. Please don't let the sergeants come around the corner. Please don't let anyone, please, the radio, don't talk to me right now because I can't even clear my throat, to talk on the radio. I felt wonderful after I had wept it out of me. I felt wonderful for crying, but then also that, that pendulum of shame and guilt and fear, and also, am I crazy?
You were picked for that assignment. You were chosen among many people to wear that badge and wear that shield and go out there and protect other people in the face of danger, in the face of ridicule, in face of riots. Mm-hmm. You're out there to protect people and to be there for them, even if they don't want you to be there for them. And you're expected to be Superman or Superwoman. And, you might find out that you're really not. You're a human being. You're not a robot. You do have feelings. We have to be able to express them and not be afraid of the stigma that we're trying to break as we're speaking right now. We're trying to break that stigma. And it's working. It is working. I see it every day, every single day. I have the honor to work with first responders in recovery for mental health issues, alcohol issues, all kinds of trauma. And I have met some of the best friends that I've ever had in my life. And it is a blessing. And there's lots of people, the word's spreading, and you're not alone. And a lot of departments are starting to see that it's a benefit to get help and to take care of their own, because I'm telling you what, we're assets to them. We really are. And we need to be good when we get on those streets and those calls, not just saying we're good.
And then can we find our way to being good when we're home? How do we balance all of this out? How do we leave that all behind and learn how to, find our way to being healthy? We've talked about it before, Mike. What happens to a firefighter, a paramedic, a dispatcher, a police officer, sheriff deputy, from probation, parole, you name it? What happens from the pre-hiring days when you're working out and you're on your A game and you're just shredding it because you want to do well when you not just get hired, go through the background process. You got an academy to get through, you've got probation to get through, and then you're kind of on your way. What happens between that time and 10 years, 20 years, 30-year career? And what was the latest research? When a person in the EMS profession retires after 20 to 30 years, your life expectancy is between 3 and 5 years.
Yes.
All the
EMS and police also.
Yep. Yep.
And if you add alcohol to it and you've been drinking already, guess what? Your drinking game's going to go up exponentially because, you don't have to go to work anymore. You can sit home and start drinking in the morning. So a lot of us end up crashing and burning after retirement, and we don't have a plan. Yeah. Retirement's our plan. We get cut off from everything we knew before, and now we're not fire anymore. We're not police anymore. We're not EMT anymore. If you've identified with that as your person, as what you are, it could be really detrimental to your health. So starting early is good. And I think if anybody can get anything out of what we're talking about right now, if they're in training or if they're just listening and they want to do something for their department and for their brothers and sisters out there, start a group up. Might start with one person, anywhere you can have a confidential space to come to and start inviting people to it. And then maybe get a format going and have a weekly meeting. And I'm telling you, it does work when we work together because we're pack animals. And that's what we do. We need our tribe.
The strength of the wolf is the pack, and the strength of the pack is the wolf. I didn't make that up. That comes from the Jungle Book, Rudyard Kipling. But it's very accurate. And as Mike is saying, if you have a group that you know about, give it a shot. What's the worst that can happen?
Well, let's see how many people respond to us. If you need any information, get back to us. Send us an email, a text.
It sounds great. There's so much to talk about. Mike and I have a number of topics to go through, but like he was saying, if you have something specific you want us to address, please let us know. What a privilege to be on this podcast with you, Mike, as usual. And for those folks that are listening out there, as I understand it, there's such a growing audience, not just in the United States, but in some foreign countries as well. You know, you have developed such an audience. And if we can help one person out there that's listening, I'd be very happy, and look forward to hearing from you all.
Right on, Jim. Thank you, buddy. And everybody else, we'll talk next time. Take care of each other and be good to one another. Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to Positive Connections Radio on the Mental Health News Radio Network. If you're having issues, you can do it alone. However, you don't have to. It takes courage to ask for help. How can we be there for others if we're unwilling to be there for ourselves? So until next time, be strong, stand up, speak your truth, and break the stigma.